To talk about this moment in time at the FTC, first of all.
Okay.
Is it the FTC that's keeping it? I mean, what's happening that
Okay.
is now holding Amazon and Google to account, or trying
Right.
to?
So by and large, the Biden administration is like kind of terrible in a lot of different areas, but they're great on antitrust, which is the area I deal with, and competition policy, and that's basically the rules that we use to organize big business. Um, it's just important set of rules, not the only rules. Lots of other rules that we use, but antitrust is a system of law that you use to make sure that companies don't monopolize markets or don't engage in price fixing, or other forms of collusive behavior to undermine the rights of the public in different ways, consumers or workers or suppliers or communities. We have, won't surprise you, we have not been enforcing these laws for 40 years. And so we have a monopoly crisis in lots of different areas, like everywhere from, Google, which is a monopoly over search, to things like baby formula, where you have, those are state level monopolies, or airlines, right? We have just a few major airlines and then specific routes. Oftentimes there's two or sometimes even one choice. And so, and you can find all over the economy, from mail sorting software to cable to whatever it is. You have one or two choices, or three or four choices, but they sort of tacitly collude. And so the terms by which we engage in commerce are set by a small group of people far away from us, right? We live in a democracy in the political realm, but in the commercial realm, we're really in an authoritarian world, increasingly. So how we work, how we trade, how we buy and sell, how we exchange information, all of these are mediated by one or two entities. So traditionally the way that we deal with this problem is through antitrust, which allows the government or private actors to sue when a company is using unfair or coercive practices to build or maintain a monopoly. And there are lots of different ways that companies do this, and there are lots of different ways you can use antitrust law or laws against unfair competition to address it. And what we're starting to see over the last few years is that the government is actually starting to use this type of law, and so are private litigants. And there are, I think, two big cases right now, although, there's lots of cases in lots of areas of the economy that indicate this significant change. So there's a trial against Google for monopolization that's going on right now in DC. It's been going on since September 12th, and it'll probably go on until mid-November. And that's for Google's monopolization of the search engine market. And then and that's run by the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, which divides antitrust authority with the other main agency, which is the Federal Trade Commission. And then the other big case is the Federal Trade Commission that just filed a case against Amazon for monopolizing online retail markets and inflating prices to consumers in a way that hides the price increase, which I can go into as well. There's a lot of other stuff it's not just big tech, like the DOJ just found a giant price fixing conspiracy among meat packers. So turkey, pork, chicken, those prices are inflated because of a company that essentially sold data about what every company was charging to all of the companies in the industry, and then gave them consulting services and said, raise your price here, cut your output there. And you see this like kind of across the economy. But the big cases are the ones against Google and Amazon, because these are the $1 trillion companies. So it's like a big moment, right? Because you haven't seen a major monopolization case for 25 years since the Microsoft trial in 1998. These are high-tech companies. These are the companies that are sort of bleeding edge. These are the companies that are going to deploy generative artificial intelligence, which everyone sort of sees as kind of the next frontier of science and technology. So it's a big deal. It says a lot about where our society is going to go and who's in control of it. But it's also, these are large companies that make a lot of money. They are defunding the press, the local news publishers. They also control access to information. Google would be in the form of the web, Amazon in the form of books. And then they structure markets for millions of small businesses who have to obey their terms or go out of business. So it's like a big deal. It's fascinating. It's an amazing time to be paying attention. It's bipartisan too. So it's like a really interesting area of politics that I think people should pay attention to.
It's why I wanted to have you on. I think you're exactly right. It's really a moment, and I have a couple of follow-ups. First of all, it's galling to think that there's this collusion in the meat industry, and that because these meat industry, Amazon and Google, you can speak to this, but I mean they get great benefits, tax benefits from us, the American taxpayers. The meat industry is supported by us. I mean, so when you hear that there is collusion going on or there's any kind of strategy to increase prices, it's particularly galling, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so it right now, I think people are sensitive to price, and I think for two reasons. One, there's been a lot of inflation, and so prices are much higher. But two, I think that we don't poll on this or measure this, but I think there's just been a lot more cheating, and I think everybody kind of notices that you're like asked for tips a lot more. Like my locksmith had like a line for tips, like weird stuff. And then like you have like random administrative fees on every single bill now. And it's like, so it's not that prices, like, yeah, prices are much higher. And that's really, depending on your circumstances, it can be annoying or it can be really devastating, but it also feels really unfair. And that's like the situation that we're in. And so with the Amazon case, it's about, well, I mean, I could go into it. I want
to go into it in just 1 second. I want to, but I just want to get clear on this. You're saying that there are sort of these insidious ways to mark up what would otherwise be either transactions or goods and services that didn't exist before?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so if you look at the meatpacking case, right? So one of the interesting things is there was this debate a couple of years ago about whether inflation was being driven by corporate collusion and concentration or not, right? Right after the pandemic, there's all this like massive price hikes, but also like, it's not like we're getting paid more. Although I'm an out of touch elite in DC, so I get paid more, right?
I can tell.
Yes, no. But profits were way up, and people were like, well, maybe the profits are up. And that's driving price hikes. And all the economists were like, you are so ridiculous. This is just supply and demand. And there's no evidence that concentration is driving price hikes or that it's even increased in concentration. But of course, if you look at like Amazon, obviously they are a monopolist of online retail. I think everybody kind of knows that. But you could look at the meatpacking industry. Well, say, well, they're not a monopolist. There's 4 companies that are in the, say, pork processing industry or beef processing industry. It's not a monopoly. But it's like, if they all belong to the same company that like that tells them what to price, like basically if they have a price fixing conspiracy, then even though there are 4 companies, there is actually unified control. It operates like a monopoly. And we've seen that and then this is a good case in the meat industry. But, the ProPublica exposed that there's something similar in rentals. So landlords, particularly large institutional landlords, all use the same rental software, which offers them recommendations on pricing. So you might see like landlords refusing to lower rent. They normally would lower rent or they normally wouldn't raise it as high, but because they're getting recommendations of pricing from this central kind of price fixer, it is driving up prices. And my guess is that if you look in the economy writ large, what you'd find is that this is actually far more pervasive than you would expect. So companies, there's a kind of loose coordination going on across corporate America to kind of raise prices on all of us. And there are also all of these kind of like consultants like McKinsey and Bain, they all have pricing arms and they recommend to companies, here's where you can stick a fee into what you're charging. So like the movie theater chains, you go to a movie theater and it's like, if you go to the ticket window and you buy a ticket, it's $10 or $15 or whatever it is. If you buy it online, they add like a $3 convenience fee. And why? It's actually like lower cost for them to add for if you buy it online. They don't have to hire someone to take, to give you change or whatever it is. But they just are like, oh, well, our like annoying economist told us that's a friction point where we can force someone to pay a few more dollars. And that's what's happening across the economy. And that's not necessarily illegal. Some of this is illegal, but it does indicate a kind of loose coordination that allows for this kind of like corporate America to kind of raise prices on all of us without delivering anything more or better. And I think that's generating a really angry political backlash, as it should.
That's so well described. And now I want you to well describe what's happening on Amazon. Did you have something for Kim? Kim, did you have something
No, I
for Matt
just
before?
wanted to agree. I had to buy a high school yearbook the other day for my daughter. It was $95, and I go onto the Jostens website. They charged me a $5 fee for the privilege of using their website, a website use fee.
That's right. Exactly. It's like I have to pay. I have to pay like my Pepco bill, right? So for my like utility bill, and it's like a $3 surcharge to use their payment system, right? And I'm like, this is it's like the $95 is outrageous, right? It's a yearbook, but the $5 is what makes it unfair, right? Because you're just like, oh, they're ripping me off, right? Like they're just taking money because they have power over me.
And you have no choice but to pay it if you
And
want
that's
the
what,
yearbook.
and in
you
the
gotta cough it
aggregate,
up.
and in the aggregate, Matt's saying, yeah, and people have. That's what really has. There's a collective anger about
It's
just
true.
this.
Like I had an experience last night. I went to a local restaurant, and they put, so DC passed a law saying that you have to pay your waiters minimum wage, and regardless of tips. And so what a lot of the restaurants in DC started doing is they started putting this special charge on their menus saying it's the I-82 charge, saying you have to pay this extra charge to pay wages. And then they also ask for tips. And I was like, don't raise your prices. Like raise your prices so that you can charge, what you need to charge to run your business. Don't put an extra fee. And then what they were trying to do is they were trying to say, well, they effectively tried to guilt me into being like, well, you have to also tip because, our waiters work hard. And I was like, you are trying to manipulate me into actually having to like pay your fee and also pay wages that you should be paying. Just raise your prices to something to run your business so you can do it reasonably and fairly. And whenever a restaurant is like, we're raising our prices because costs went up, I'm like, okay, I don't like it, but I get it. It's fine. It's fair. It's reasonable. It may not be nice, but it's reasonable. But like, it's this ticky-tack cheating bullshit that I think is like, it's just overwhelming and constant. And like the restaurant did it, and they are like not that good at it because they're small business. So they don't, you actually have someone you can complain to and be like, please don't do this, right? Yeah. It's the big businesses and the businesses that are distant that can put the friction point in a way that you have no way to push back.
And you feel like ripped off.
Totally. I mean, this constant...
It is a ripoff in a way. I saw the same thing, Matt, where the other night, it's funny you mentioned restaurants because it's an odd thing that they added as a line item, a health and medical for staff line there. I mean, I'm thinking, why don't you just factor that into the price of the entrees? You know what I mean?
So I was like, it's very confusing. And what they're doing is there's like a guilt trip going on there where it's like, I don't want to deal with your emotional stuff. Like I want to go, like, I'll pay you what you charge more if you need more. And I can make a decision about whether to buy when I look at the menu. Don't like charge me extra. And that's the way that like it was. I'm particularly annoyed because this happened last night, but like a few weeks ago, it was the locksmith, and the locksmith wasn't at fault. He worked for some locksmith company. It was the app that he was using to charge, right? Which is a software app that makes it super easy to ask for tips. And so they did. And then it's like, it is a very weird change in our economy that I think is like spearheaded by, by like this extreme form of passive aggressive, unethical greed. And like, I don't know. It's something that I think there's like an element of this inflation, which has to do with basic fairness, and people don't feel like the situation right now is fair to them. And they don't feel like they have choices they don't feel like they have choices in what they're buying, and they don't feel like they're being the payment, like the prices are told to them up front. There's just like,
and
it's cheating.
And well, you said a lot, and the competitive environment doesn't exist. There's a patina of a competitive environment, but it's not
Right.
really a competitive environment, and that brings us to Amazon.
Let's talk
So
about that.
Amazon seems like just the coolest thing. You're Amazon Prime. You never have to pay for
Right.
shipping. Blah blah blah
Right.
blah. Matt, break it down. Amazon is really a lot more than meets the eye.
Yeah, so Amazon Prime has 170 million members, which is basically every household in America. I think more people by a large degree have Amazon Prime membership than go to church. It's just this is a and it's a really good deal. You get free shipping and a low price guarantee. So what could be wrong with that? And the answer is a lot. There is actually a hidden tax that Amazon imposes, not just on all of their Amazon Prime customers, but on pretty much everyone who buys anything on the internet. And it doesn't appear that way, but here's how it works. About 60% of what's sold on Amazon isn't sold directly by Amazon. It's sold by third-party sellers. So you can think of Amazon's business as they're like a shopping mall, right? And so there is an Amazon store in the shopping mall, so you can buy things directly from Amazon. But there are also a lot of other stores that pay rent to Amazon for placement in the Amazon store, in the Amazon mall. And Amazon charges a lot of money to be in the Amazon mall because if you're selling online, that 170 million Prime customers, they buy from Amazon. They don't really price shop or anything like that. So if you're trying to sell online, you either sell through Amazon or you don't sell online, right? That's pretty much the way it goes. Or you just completely go off Amazon and it's very difficult, but you could lose 40-50% of your customers if you don't. So what does Amazon do with this power? Right? The ability that you have to sell through Amazon. Well, they say you're going to pay us about 50% of your revenue. So the take rate, which is to say that to be in the Amazon mall, you have to pay them every dollar you get in revenue, you have to give Amazon 50 cents of it. But also, Amazon says you're not allowed to charge lower prices outside of Amazon. And what that means is that companies raise their prices everywhere else on the web to make sure that Amazon's prices are not higher than anyone else's. And then all the free shipping, right, and all of the Amazon Prime benefits are paid for with this 50% take rate, this giant fee. So let me just give you a little bit of math. It won't be too much. Let's say that you're buying 10, it's a widget, you pay $10 on Amazon. The merchant that's making the widget gets $5. They could sell it off Amazon for $5, but they're not allowed to. So they have to sell it for $10 on Amazon and $10 off of Amazon. So you think you're getting the lowest price because you're like, well, it's $10 on Amazon is $10 off of Amazon. But if Amazon didn't have anti-discounting provisions in their relationship with merchants, it would be $5 outside of Amazon. And you would be able to buy it for half the price you're paying. So it's a hidden tax that people don't see. That amounts to about, that 50% take rate amounts to about $130 billion a year. And that's what actually pays for the quote unquote free shipping and all of the other stuff. And it inflates prices across the economy. It's a really clever form of cheating because people don't see it, so they don't think it's happening. But it explains why prices are going up broadly, and things are the sort of the low price guarantee on Amazon just means that prices are higher everywhere. It doesn't mean that things are cheap on Amazon. It means that they're more expensive everywhere, more expensive than they should be.
That's such a fascinating and underhanded way to do it. Clever, maybe I mean, clever in an underhanded way on the part of Amazon. And to be clear, you're saying if I'm selling my widget and trying to discount it somewhere else, Amazon will exile me from Amazon. I can't do that. That's violation of the terms that I agree to when I am a merchant on Amazon.
It's not, so they used to have it in the contract. They used to say, you just can't sell this outside of Amazon for a lower price. And then they got in, the Senate wrote to them and Europeans started investigating. And so Amazon said, oh, we won't do that. That's not right. That's illegal and unethical. So what they just started doing is they just started doing it via an algorithm. So they would say, if we scrape the web and if we find the price of your item cheaper anywhere else, you just won't appear on Amazon search results, right? So that's
Yeah,
and
that's the mall that you're talking about.
right.
Like that's the mall I want to be in. I want to be on that first page of Amazon choices if I'm a merchant.
Right. Well, I mean, when you go to it's called the buy box, right? It's this technical thing. When you search for a product on Amazon, you like a whatever it is, a pen or something like that. You go and there's a bunch and it says buy, click here to buy now, right? That's called the buy box, and Amazon gets to choose which merchant is gets to be that buy box, gets to deliver that particular sale. And like 80-90% of the time, the customer will just click buy. And if they want to, if they know that there are other merchants that are selling this, which most people don't and don't care about, there is a small link that says, look at other merchants. And you can click on that. And it's, 5 to 10% of the time people might do that. But essentially, if you can't get the buy box, then you can't sell on Amazon. And if you are charging lower price for something off of Amazon, then Amazon won't let you get the buy box. And so some merchants have said, not just we're going to charge lowest prices on Amazon and we won't charge lower prices anywhere else. They actually are like, we're not even going to sell anywhere else. We're not going to sell on our own website because it's just not worth it. Because Amazon makes mistakes too. They might screw up and you will never win the buy box and you won't know why. Like, it's really opaque and weird. Another thing that came out in the case is there's apparently something called Project Nessie, which Amazon just arbitrarily raised prices on consumers through a secret algorithm. They just kind of did. And then there was a congressional investigation in 2019 and they stopped doing it. But there was
across the board when you say they kind of raised prices?
No, they would do it so Amazon changes prices 2.5 million times a day. So what would happen is at arbitrary moments, and I just talked to somebody who used to be at Amazon about this. He's like, he used to sell TVs, and he's like, at random moments, we would not know why a product was sold, and we didn't he's like, we were told why Amazon was the one that was able to sell the TV. Usually it's because we had the lowest price, but sometimes we would lose, we wouldn't win the buy box. It would go to someone else, and that was sometimes because someone else had the lowest price, or sometimes we were out of stock, and so someone else, would sell it. But then he's like, at this certain moment, I guess this is 2015 or 2016, we started getting this report on why we didn't win the sale, and it just said Project Nessie. And he's like, we had no idea what it was. But if it was if we lost it because it was the lowest price, it would have said price. But it just said Project Nessie. And he was like, he's like, internally, the people at Amazon who sold stuff, they hated it because it was clearly imposed by the higher ups. And what it turns out Project Nessie is Amazon would just arbitrarily raise prices on something and then hope that other entities online like Walmart or Best Buy or whoever it was would also raise prices. And then if others raised prices, then they would keep their prices high. So it was like this way of tacitly signaling to everyone online, hey, let's all raise prices. And just such a scam. It's such a scam. And that's what they're doing. I don't know. It's
so now speak to, if you would, Matt, speak
that's
to
where
what's
the
happening.
free shipping comes from. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right.
Guys, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Free shipping. It's not like they invented it. They're not magical. They're just stealing.
Speak to this moment, though, where as we started there and we can finish in the same place, which I think makes front and center an effort to rein in some of what you're talking about. Is it a reality?
Yeah, I mean, the complaint is pretty good. The complaint goes into all of this and says, here are the things that Amazon is doing to raise prices. And they, saying you can't discount outside of Amazon, it's called an anti-discounting provision. And so one of the things that they think you could do with this lawsuit, if it's going forward, it'll probably take a few years. Although it's having impacts now. Amazon is starting to treat their third-party sellers better. But if you can get rid of the anti-discounting provisions, then the economics of Amazon don't make any sense because what will happen is you'll see lower prices and competition. And so Amazon is going to have to actually start to compete on price again, which they haven't had to do for quite some time. And a lot of like the internal systems are actually pretty inefficient. They're just supported by monopolization. It's why they can spend $1 billion on like stupid Lord of the Rings stuff. Like no one paying for that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And they're going to have to stop like wasting all that money. And one of the ways you know that Amazon's like not actually very good, they're not a very efficient corporation, is their executives. Like other companies are often going to Amazon and being like, we need a new CEO. Let's get someone from Amazon because they're great, because they're so, Amazon's amazing. And what started to happen is like companies have hired out of Amazon, hired CEOs. And then after about a year or two, they usually get rid of them because they screw up the company because they're not good at anything. They're just good at like operating within a monopoly. And that's
yeah. And so I just want you to spend a second on Lena Khan, because she kind of broke down some of this. There's been much made of, maybe you can tell us who Lena Khan is and her, just summarize sort of why she might be a difference maker, or is she a difference maker potentially?
Well, she's the most hated woman on Wall Street. I'll say that.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's just solid.
Yeah, right.
Like Wall Street supported Biden, particularly the private equity industry supported Biden in 2020. And almost single-handedly, because of Lena Khan, not entirely, but almost single-handedly, they are considering supporting Trump in 2024. So to me, that's A-okay, right? And it's because she's thrown a spanner into the works of mergers and acquisitions on Wall Street, which is sort of the bread and butter of consolidation that makes our lives worse. But in terms of what she did with Amazon, is she is famous. She's a young academic, and she got famous for writing a law review paper when she was in law school in 2017, called Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, in which she argued that that Amazon's structure and strategy was a function of law. They weren't geniuses. They weren't like super tech savvy types. They were just people who really understood how to avoid antitrust scrutiny and how to actually organize a business around monopolistic principles. And she used that story to explain why antitrust law and regulatory policy had really gone awry since the 1970s. It's like, how can you have an antitrust law on the books that said monopolization is illegal, and yet have companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Apple and Facebook, some of the biggest companies the world has ever seen? These two things are incongruous unless there's a specific interpretive framework for antitrust, which doesn't allow antitrust enforcers to bring cases. And so she described that dynamic, and why Amazon is such a powerful and important company. And now, 6 years later, she's the chair of the commission that actually filed a case saying Amazon is unlawfully maintaining its monopoly and should be broken up. And that's, I think, a big deal and speaks to the power of ideas, and the power of the potential good that we can do through politics.
Well, I love that you mentioned this last thing, and such a good drill down a little bit on Lena Khan and her importance. But the last thing you mentioned is that we can make a difference. This is not just like a lot of other issues where you go, well, it's just too big. I don't know what we can do.
Right.
Because it's this can be influenced by consumer dissatisfaction and by popular dissatisfaction. Make enough noise, and we can actually make a change here.
Well, I would say I would sort of slightly tweak what you said. So as a consumer, you have no power, and as a consumer, doesn't make sense to go off of Amazon. Same thing with Google. It's like, these are monopolies, right? And if you buy from Amazon, you buy from Amazon, right? I'm not a Prime member, but it doesn't matter. Like, I use Google, I use Amazon, I use these companies. You don't have these are institutions that are creatures of law, and so we need to use politics in the best sense of the word to restructure them and to restructure our markets. So this is if the dissatisfaction as a consumer, you express that through politics, and you tell your policymakers to address it, or you bring cases yourself for support, and you could tell your state AG to do it. Like, all these things matter and are really helpful. I don't think that, we're not consumers who vote with our wallets. That's not a thing. You spend
No,
money.
when I say make noise, I mean through the political pipelines.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to you. I'm just, a lot of people think, well, they feel guilty. They're like, why? Oh, I buy from Amazon. I know they're just really convenient, and but I know I shouldn't. And you're like, no, it's fine. This is a political problem. This is not a problem you can address through your choices of where to spend things. Like, that's a fake thing. Consumer boycotts don't work, and they never have. They're very rare instances. They have to be paired with aggressive political action as well.
That's why this Lena Khan is exciting, and that there is some political noise. But as you said, we're swimming upstream against some pretty strong currents. The last thing I will just check off with you on is, I think the process of regulating or going through the courts, or the legal process, if you will, it takes years, doesn't it? This whole process is very slow.
It does. It takes a long time, and Biden's judges are bad. He keeps picking bad judges. We have like a thoroughly mediocre legal establishment. Most of the Democratic world, and Republican
You're saying, but when you
world,
say bad judges, you mean that their disposition toward big business is very positive, right?
yeah, they're like people who think that like they can, that corporations need to be protected from the government. And they believe, they did some pro bono work for the ACLU, but at the same time, they're like cool with price fixing, and they're cool with Google, right? I was just looking at this like woman named Karen Dunn, who's a big law person. She works at a firm called Paul Weiss. She was almost the head of the Antitrust division, and she, like, on her bio, it's like she helped prosecute the Charlottesville thing. She helped do debate prep for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. And she helped prepare Jeff Bezos' testimony before the House Antitrust Subcommittee. And she represents Google. And it's like, that's the vibe. That's like a lot of the vibe in the Democratic legal establishment and the Republican legal establishment, except you flip the social issues. It's not the vibe for like Lena Khan. It's not the vibe for like Jonathan Cantor. They're different. Like, in both parties, there are populists, and then there are the kind of anti-populists. And I think you have a war and a fight within the establishment over this. And so that's why, like, the Biden administration, there are a bunch of people who believe what we believe, which is that like being nickeled and dimed is a political crisis, and we need to get on it. But then there are a lot more people in that Democratic establishment who are, who don't really see a problem. And I think that, it's way better than it was under Obama. Obama was terrible, and his people were almost uniformly horrible. Biden, you got a quarter of them are okay, and a few of them are great, and a lot of them are bad. But like, it's still a lot better than the travesty that was the Obama administration. But like, I think the basic dynamic here for people who care about political economy is, whether you're Republican or you're Democrat, you have to work within your party to say we need a different approach to political economy. And that's like, I think that's kind of the core of it. And we need to move these people who have done such damage to our society out of the way, and on both sides.
So good, Matt. I love your Substack. I'm a paid subscriber, and I encourage everybody else to jump on it. Big by Matt Stoller, and he lays it all out there and follows all of this stuff. And a lot of the minutia of this is hard to follow, but you make it all palatable. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you, Matt Stoller.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Matt Stoller, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.